Good evening. This is Thomas Garza, and I would like to thank you for joining me for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM and UPTV. Tonight we have an interview with Jane Gaskin, one of the authors of a book entitled The Politics of Immigration. U.S. immigration has been the subject of furious debates for decades. On one side, politicians and the media talk about aliens and criminals with calls to deport them all. On the other side, some advocates idealize immigrants and gloss over problems associated with immigration. Dialogue becomes impossible when we dig deeper and ask tough questions. Why are people in other countries leaving their homes and coming here? What does it mean to be illegal? How do immigration raids, prisons, and border walls impact communities? Who suffers and who profits from our current system? And what would happen if we transformed it? The Politics of Immigration, Questions and Answers, goes beyond sound bites to tackle these concerns in straightforward language and an accessible question and answer format. First published in 2007, there's now an updated and expanded edition, which is an effective tool to confront current stereotypes and disinformation. Those who believe immigrants take jobs from citizens, don't pay taxes, strain public services, and threaten the dominant culture will find their assumptions challenged with compelling arguments and hard data. This book is ideal for classroom use. The Politics of Immigration provides those who are undecided about immigration with the facts and clear reasoning they need to develop an informed opinion. A second edition appeared in May, updated and expanded for 2017. And I'm very pleased to get a chance to talk with Jane about her book. Now, the following video is interrupted in a number of ways. We couldn't arrange a time for her to come in the studio, so we met at someone's house. We had people coming over to the house, people walking in and joining the conversation. So it's a bit chopped up, but I hope that from this you can get a good sense of what she was thinking about the book and get a little more information about immigration. So I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. So hi.
Hi.
To viewers of the show might notice, regular viewers of the show might notice we're in an unconventional setting here. We are at a mysterious location that cannot be named. This is a safe house. We're going to be altering your voice and your face with the pixelation to protect your identity, but if you would be so kind, could you introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Jane Gaskin. I am the co-author of The Politics of Immigration, Questions and Answers.
It's available for sale.
Yes.
You can buy this book.
And so the first edition of this came out in 2007, and this is the second edition, and it came out last year. It's thicker, but not. People should not be scared of reading it because 1/3 of it is actually notes at the end.
Whoa.
So it's really only this thick. And the idea of the book is to take all of the sorts of questions and myths and all of these things that are sort of floating out there around immigrants and about immigration and respond to them with arguments and facts and everything being very well sourced and referenced. And so it's a tool for people to have the information that they need. They may hear something and think, well, that doesn't sound right to me, but they don't necessarily know what the story is. And sort of in the process gives a little bit of the kind of history and politics of immigration policy in this country and law in this country. So it's not about immigration law as such, but it gets into why we have what we have and what isn't working for whom and how it could be changed. So,
how did you? Is this like an academic work? Did it come off of your academic research, or
no?
This is just like
no.
How
actually,
did you get interested in this?
So I was an immigrant rights activist because of well, I was involved actually in Central America Solidarity work in the 1980s, and actually the co-author was as well, and we met doing Central America Solidarity work, and then that sort of morphed into including some immigration issues, and I was writing a newsletter on politics in Latin America, but then also started writing about immigration, and then I met an immigrant, and we ended up getting married, and he was undocumented, and so going through the process of trying to get him his documents, about a 7-year process, and before it was even over, I was so angry and so motivated that I got involved in immigrant rights organizing. I originally said, I really, I'm going to wait until he gets his green card and then I'll get involved. And then in the end, I said, I can't wait. Yeah. I was just too angry at the system and how it worked. And that was actually a much easier time. So if his situation, he would have been deported if it was now. He slipped in through the laws at the time, which was the early 90s. He managed to slip in through a particular little time when things were able to be worked out for him. Otherwise, he would have been deported. So that's how I got involved in immigration stuff, and I started writing a separate newsletter that was just about immigration issues, and I got involved in this group called the Coalition for the Human Rights of Immigrants, doing organizing. This is in New York City, and then so the 2006 all kinds of things happened. The coalition that I was working with sort of fell apart. We did a lot of stuff around the detentions that happened after 9/11, and that really took a lot out of the group. A bunch of people went and became lawyers and left the group. Some other organizations folded that were part of the coalition, and a couple of us, including the co-author and I, were very burned out because we'd spent 2 years trying to get a friend out of immigration detention. And so then the 2006 protests happened, and that was amazing and sort of motivating. And then Monthly Review Press came to us and said, we think there's a book that needs to be written, and we want you guys to write it.
Oh, good.
So I said, all right. Sure. So we wrote it. So we wrote the first edition. It took us a year. We wrote the whole book in a year, on top of our regular jobs and all the other stuff we were doing. And then we started doing, so people would say, can you come give an author talk? Something. We developed this dialogue model where instead of giving an author talk, which that just seemed to me that would get boring really quickly. I know what I'm going to say. I want to hear what other people have to say. Right. So this dialogue model really is a sort of participatory, interactive thing where we have people say either questions they have about immigrants, about immigration, things they've heard other people say that they maybe don't know the answer to or would like a better answer to, all these kinds of things, and we write them up on a blackboard or on paper or whatever it is. We write it up there, and we learned later that was actually a really crucial component. It wasn't so well planned out, but when we write things up there, people felt heard. They felt like their question had been heard, and then they were more open to hearing what was going on. So especially useful with a group where not everybody was really on the same page as us with immigration. So we did a couple of dialogues at Suffolk County Community College, which is in a very anti-immigrant community in Long Island, and that was very powerful. So we did a bunch of these dialogues. I went out and did some in San Diego County. I did some in the Midwest here, and did a number in the New York area, and then we were working on a second edition because basically a lot of things became out of date. I mean, not that the immigration laws changed much, unfortunately, but just, the sources cited were old, the numbers cited were old, so we worked on a second edition. It took a lot longer and it's it's a lot thicker and a lot more detail. And then in the meantime, I went back to school. I had dropped out of college, and I went back to school. So I was finishing up. Actually, the book came out at the end of my last semester of undergrad, and I was finishing my thesis and taking 5 classes and working and all these other things. And then so now I'm in a PhD program in sociology, studying migration, race, and social change, and labor, and just trying to do some follow-up with the book and the dialogues, and we developed another dialogue model that involves sort of getting people to talk about what's wrong with our current immigration system, and then coming up with what we should do. So here, those of us here in the room, we're going to write a new immigration policy in the next 45 minutes.
Right.
What does it look like?
Yeah.
So we did that today, actually, in a class here. That was really fun. Cool. Broke into groups and tackled different issue areas.
So one of the most common phrases that I know, I've said this a million times, and I know other people, when I talk about immigration, it comes up a lot. So it brings up this question. You will hear so many people say, our immigration system is broken. Do you think it's broken or it's intentionally dysfunctional?
Right. We actually avoid that our immigration system is broken thing. Because, it's not broken. It works for some people. It works for unscrupulous employers who want to exploit immigrants. It works for people who want to stir up animosity against a public enemy. They make immigrants into that enemy, and so they can kind of. We've seen some of that emanating from the White House and other quarters. So it's not broken. It's. I mean, it is dysfunctional in a sense because it's not just doing one thing. It's doing a lot of things, and so it's even simultaneously both functional and dysfunctional for different actors involved in it. So you will have, you'll have sometimes like the Wall Street Journal and things like that saying, oh, we should have open borders, and they're not thinking of it in the same way that I would think of it. So there's a lot of different things going on. But I wouldn't say, oh, it's just broken and it needs to be fixed. There are definitely some interests being served with the particular ways in which it's broken.
Yeah, I guess by dysfunctional I mean if you try to look at it, it's hard to say. Look at it as a coherent whole.
It's not
a single machine, like a functioning machine, like
it's
a
not.
bread maker. It doesn't work when you press go. It'll do something, but it won't do necessarily what you want it to do. So I mean dysfunctional like that. I mean parts of it work very well at excluding certain populations, welcoming the other populations, making it hard for some people, easy for others. It works in a number of different ways. But how different is that from any number of other systems that we have in our government? I mean, since it's all patchwork anyway. There's no like single brain going, let's make this thing, let's make agriculture work for everybody. There's not. It's like this person says, let's make it work for this group, and let's make it work for this state.
There's a lot of competing interests and competing pressures and competing powers. And that's, I think, true just across the board with politics. People think of politics as this thing over there, but politics is really everything that we're doing every day. And one of the things that I learned, actually doing a lot of research for the book, as well as some of the other research that I've done, is we have a lot more impact than we even realize. There are times where we think we're not winning anything, but we are actually pushing things back. And you can see when you look at patterns. There were two sort of issues that I looked at in the book specifically that I saw that historic trend through. One of them was around detaining families with children. So there were sort of patterns in the the policy and the pushback in various ways, both legal pushback and then protest pushback and then policies and the way it all shifted. And you could see these up and down patterns. So there was a period when the protests became very intense against family detention, and then family detention stopped. Essentially stopped. There was still one very small detention center, but it was not the worst of it. And then it all came back at this certain point, and then there was more pushback against it, and then so it's sort of gone through these different phases. And then the other one was the workplace raids, and so again you see these sort of trends in it where the policy shifts and changes, and that is not independent of what people are doing on the ground in terms of organizing and raising consciousness and raising awareness and mobilizing and protesting and all of those things. So, yeah.
I guess I wonder about that because immigration is such a useful tool. It's almost like a wonder tool for politicians to use to say just about anything they want to say. You can promote the American ideal by, we welcome immigrants, we're a nation of immigrants. That whole rhetoric that you hear, you can use it as easy stories of like, look, here's Luis who came here. He had a sombrero and 1 peso in his pocket, and now he's the owner of, you can draw these really rich, patriotic stories out of it. You can demonize people. I mean, it's like just a flip a switch and it suddenly does the exact opposite of what it was doing, 10 minutes ago for somebody else. So I guess what I'm wondering is it more dysfunctional because of that, because people are messing with it so much, or is it just typically dysfunctional and they mess with it? Those are two separate issues. If that makes any sense as a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I really know the answer to that, if there is an answer, but I do think immigration is an issue that gets at some very kind of core conceptual
who are we
parts of
what
who are we and who are
we?
they who are we and who are they and that's pretty core in terms of national ideas of nationality, ideas of citizenship, ideas of belonging and not belonging, and all of that. So yeah, I think it doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that are similar and sometimes intersect. Race, crime, all these different issues sort of intersect in various ways with immigration. Just in terms of the rhetoric and the political, the ways it's used politically to accomplish certain things. So, and I don't, we're not a country that is known for being sort of very intellectually reflective about the various sorts of attitudes about citizenship and belonging and that kind of thing. So I think that there are ways in which it just kind of defaults to this, but we, they.
Well, it's just so easy to create that, and it's actually hard when everyone is a potential constituent. Like if you're running for office, you can choose like racial distinctions, you can choose class things, you can choose all those things to operate with, but you have to realize that you are alienating a portion of the electorate.
Right.
Now, maybe you can do that in your district. Your district is this room here, and I'm your constituent. We can alienate all those other people out there, like creeps that we don't like, because they're not voting for you.
Right.
I'm the only one, so as long as you're making me happy, that's good. But immigrants, I guess what's so good about them is that they're not voters usually.
Well, that's not true, though. I mean, many immigrants are naturalized citizens, and the vast majority of immigrants are living in mixed status families.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So, even undocumented immigrants have family members who are citizens and family members who are residents, and residents can become citizens, and children born here are citizens, and we're now many immigrants came during the 1990s and have been here undocumented immigrants have been here since the 1990s, which means they have kids who are turning 18, turning 19, who are citizens and ready to vote.
That's a good point. I guess even whenever you mobilize the immigrant word, there are so many different ideas of what that means, who that is. And at that moment, I was talking, I guess, about undocumented people and ignoring all the other people who know them, love them, hang out with them, are friends with them, are married to them, and everything else. But yeah, you're right. That's true. See, even I do this like every week. I have these kinds of conversations, and even I will sometimes forget who I'm talking about. Right. Because I just get this picture in my head, this stereotype, like this is the immigrant I'm speaking of at the moment. You know? Right.
And I mean, the other thing that's really important for people to remember is that it's a lack of, the sort of undocumented status or lack of immigration status or being unauthorized or whatever term people want to use. It's a state that can be temporary. It's not a type of person.
Yeah.
Right. So, so for example, my ex was undocumented. He then became a permanent legal resident through marriage with me. If the laws had been different, he would have been deported, but he wasn't deported.
Right.
But he had been detained when he crossed the border. So then he became a citizen, and then he was even working as a poll worker, at the elections. So was he a good immigrant or a bad immigrant? Oh, wait, he was simultaneously both, well, not quite simultaneously both, but he was one and then the other, and then, so it's either one person can go through this trajectory, right? And of course, that trajectory is the goal of many people here who are without status, is to gain that status, because without it, I'm not going to say it's everybody's, not necessarily everybody's goal, and that's fine too, but it is the goal of many people so that they can have that stability. And, people act as if it's a particular type of person who is undocumented. And no, it could be any type of person. No. There are lots of Irish undocumented people in New York, and Polish undocumented people, and, all kinds of people. So people have a stereotype in their mind about who is undocumented, but there's a lot of variety.
Well, there's so many stereotypes around it, and some, I think, many are conscious stereotypes. I mean, we know them. The sneaking across the border, the kids with calves the size of cantaloupes that Steve King was talking about, that are drug mules coming. There's that stereotype. There's all sorts of different stereotypes, but a lot of them are unconscious, and it's a weird thing. Like working on gender stuff. You carry this whole backlog of, a lifetime of collecting these things, and you don't even know it half the time. Even when you're thinking about it consciously and looking at it and going, okay, I've got this all figured out. There's this thing over here that you completely forgot was there until it comes up. Right. And then you go, blah, 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 and everybody looks at you like, how can you say that? That's, you're so shallow-minded. You're like, oh, I forgot that, that's this is that, and it's just very confusing sometimes to talk about this. And I guess that's partly what makes it so hard for a lot of people to understand, because you have to know so much just to even kind of get a general idea of what's actually going on versus what the media is telling you and the politicians are telling you, and the guy at the corner who hates all immigrants or whatever. Right. The guy at the corner bar who's very opinionated about this but knows nothing. Right. All these different people are telling you things all the time, and in order to even just understand that, you have to know a lot. And in order to know a lot, you have to take the time to learn it. And where do you learn it? I mean, other than your book. Right. Good time to show your book. But other than that, where does the average person learn about this stuff? Where can you go? That's a long question.
I mean, that's really why we wrote the book, right? It really is. You can't... there's a lot of different ways to approach it, and you don't really need to know everything there is to know. I mean, you don't need to know every single visa category and every single law on the books. And
someone's coming to. We're in a house right now. Pardon me. I'll answer the door.
Guess we can edit this out later.
Yeah.
Pause.
Excuse me.
Time for a commercial break.
This is a commercial break. You were telling me where people could go to get information.
I was just saying, I think that there's some things that are really very basic, and so I think you can understand some basic things about immigration without having to learn everything there is to know about it. I mean, I think there are some, the aspects of it that are very inhumane. People need to understand that, but I also think that if people have more questions, then they should seek out the information to answer those questions. And again, this book is a really great way to get your questions answered.
Yeah, you're going to sell a bunch of those off of this show for sure. Well, I need to buy one because this is all stuff that I talk about like all the time. So
I hope you find it useful. The other thing that it has in the back of the book is a chronology of immigration law and various sorts of policies and important court rulings and things, and you can really see that was another thing that was really eye-opening. You can just sort of see all the different twists and turns of the policy. Really, a lot of it is different ways of enforcing racism through immigration policy.
Pretty much,
And they're like, we don't like this group, so we're going to make this law. And then a few years later, it's like, well, actually, there's this other group we don't like, and then we'll make the law change to keep them out, and all these kinds of things. It's interesting, actually. I just randomly ran across doing some research for another project, upstate New York, this county in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. From 1904 to 1909, their county jail was contracting with the Federal Immigration Service to detain Chinese people coming over from Canada. Who knew? So this stuff has been going on for a long time. Yeah. This is nothing new. And the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1880 was a race-based exclusionary policies. This is in this country, and so it's within a historical context as well.
Well, I'm sure when you were researching that, you probably noticed one of the more interesting aspects of the 21st century is how racism has become such a dirty word that now there are all sorts of other ways of being racist that don't require you or don't necessarily label you as a racist to support them. So you can talk about economic issues, you can talk about immigration now, you can talk about zoning, you can talk about all sorts of different things like who's getting welfare and who isn't. Crime, yeah, that's another one. There's
become stand-ins,
huge number of these
drugs.
things. Drugs, yeah.
Yeah, I was just, something, reading something today, some article, I forget where, but it talked about the militarization and how it has been, frankly, racist from the beginning. Yeah.
Sure.
On the southern border, the Mexico border,
and
it just talked.
Yeah.
It talked about.
Am I still recording?
I don't know.